Oh, you're all right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Well, my special guest today is Daryl Denton, also known by many as the Tennessee Bigfoot Man. Um, Daryl has seen the forest people, Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and encountered dogmen. His team of researchers consist of himself, Martin Groves, and Ron Moorhead, and Barton Nunnery. He has a great team, mainly researched the land between the lakes. Can we please welcome Daryl to the show? Hello there.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Well, it's been about a good year or maybe longer since you were last on the show.
Yeah, it's been pretty close to that, I think. I enjoy being on your show, and I'm always honored and considered a privilege for you to have me on. Thank you again.
Hey, thank you. Tell us about your first encounter.
My first encounter was in November of '92, actually November the 6th, and that's what got this all started for me. It was on my grandfather's farm in Cannon County, Tennessee. Um, the closest town was called Woodbury, and my granddad was probably 15 miles from there on a dirt road, gravel dirt road, and very, very rural and out in the middle of nowhere, to be blunt about it. But my granddad had lived in that area most of his life, and all of his life actually, within half a mile, and I was actually deer hunting. It was black powder opening season every year. It runs from Monday through a Sunday, and it's black powder or muzzleloader, some people call it. And
Right.
kill either sex, either the male buck deer or the female doe, and only one. And I've been hunting there for all my life, but with my friends, for the certain group of guys I was with, which was Jason, Scott, and Cody, and we had been hunting there together for the past 5 or 6 years. And I'd pull my camper up behind my truck, and we would park it next to my grandfather's barn and plug it in to the electricity, and they followed me with a truck and trailer with 4 ATVs. So we had ATVs to get to our hunting spot. Particular spot I was hunting at this time, I couldn't get an ATV there. I had to walk it because there was fences to cross and kind of difficult to get them through the fence when there's no gate. But that particular morning, I'd been there the day before and set my stand up, and it was a carry-on stand, the kind you carry on your back. It's called a climbing stand, and I'd been in there the day before and put it around a tree down next to a stream, where my grandfather told me would be the best place for a trophy whitetail buck deer. And across the stream was a clearing, and it was part of the clearing in the woods was part of his old home place. You could still see part of the tin roof and chimney as it had fallen in. My granddad was 92 years old at this particular time, and he was still in fantastic health and lived on the farm and farmed himself until later years. And I'd gotten in there, and the morning my granddad woke me up that next morning, and I headed that way. My buddies headed out to their different directions where they hunted. And after I got over the first fence, I had to climb over about a 7-foot fence, and it had a barbed wire strand on top. And I jumped over that into the leaves and started walking up the hillside, and I heard something walking. I thought it was a person because it was definitely bipedal. It would walk and stop, and I shined my flashlight in the area and never seen anything. And it stopped moving, and I continued on up. And by the time I got to coming down the last hill where I was going next to the stream, I heard the same walking, heavy steps up on the hill that I'd just come down to the left of me. And I froze and shined the light up there and trying to see if I could see something. I couldn't imagine there'd be a person in there. My granddad would never allow that, and it didn't sound like an animal, like a horse or a cow. It was definitely a couple of steps and stop, and probably watching me. But that was got down to my tree stand there next to the creek, and I got in it, sat in it, and put my climbing part onto the bottom of my feet, and I started climbing up the tree and got up about as far as I had been the day before, where I'd cut off a few limbs with a little saw I had, and had a place to hang my extra uh, shells and black powder horn, and my lunch, and also a pair of binoculars that was hanging on a branch. And I kind of leaned back and I got set, and this stand had a little bar in front of me, and it pulled up and right about under my neck. It went around me, and then it like a camo fell out underneath it that covered all the way down to past my feet. It kind of concealed me where
Yeah.
a deer or something wouldn't see any movement. And I got that all ready, and I leaned my 50 caliber muzzle over on that bar, and I was waiting for daylight. And still with a little bit of concern in my mind, thinking, what was that walking in the woods? You know, it stayed on my mind that morning. I remember it very well because it sounded like a person or a human. And thinking, is somebody in here and hunting? And that was on my mind the whole morning. And I kind of waited around, and as the sunlight started coming up across that stream in front of me, it's about a 10 or 12 foot wide creek, but it was probably 3 or 4 foot deep in spots. And at one time, there was what we called a grist mill there, where the old timers would grind their corn into flour and meal. But
All right.
that wasn't there any longer. There was remnants of it, but there was a fog on the water that morning. It was foggy, and I couldn't see the other side as the sun came up, the clearing. And as the morning went on, it cleared up where I could see it very well. And to the left of me was a large cane thicket, kind of like bamboo looking stuff that grows 14, 15, 16 foot tall, and it's real thick and probably 3 or 4 inches around in size, and it's real durable, and it's so thick that it would be very difficult for a human to walk through that. It went all down the side of this creek to the left of me, and I couldn't see it as it went around the bend, but I could still see couldn't see where it ended, but I could still see
Yeah.
the cane. And I noticed something moving over in that area, and 3 deer came out. They crossed the creek. It was a female doe, and looked like a couple of younger ones, probably that year's foe from that year. And they went up across through the creek, up on the top of the bank on the opposite side, and there was a game trail right on top of that bank there. And the day before, I had crossed there, and I'd hung a rag up in a tree on a limb. It's called a drag rag. You put it around your boot, and when you walk in the woods, it covers up the human scent. It
Ah, right.
has a scent on it. And I went across that day as I was preparing, and I'd hung that drag rag up in the limb. It was probably about 8 foot tall. It was maybe a little more. I'd just jump up and grab it. And I'm 6'5", and I can stretch to about 8 foot. And um, it was hanging there, and the deer walked over in that area, and it was a real good year for acorns, and deers love acorns, and they were just milling around in the leaves, and they were eating acorns. They were acting normal. There was, like I said, a large female deer, a doe, and 2 younger ones behind her, one to the right and one to the left, and they were just eating acorns and walking around. Everything seemed to be normal, and then out of nowhere, the larger deer, the mother of these 2 younger ones, just started staring straight to the left over toward that cane thicket, and was literally just froze. She wasn't even moving. I could see her ear twitching a little bit. She was staring straight in there. She took her right front hoof and raised it 3 or 4 times and hit the ground like she was trying to get something to move. And The other two deer behind her, one to the right and one to the left, they were just frozen, staring straight at the same area. And then she raised her nose and she blew real loud. It sounded like somebody almost sneezing, except it's a lot louder.
Oh,
And that's usually a sign that there's something they're trying to get the attention of, and they're a little nervous when they normally do that. And
right.
then all of a sudden, for no reason at all, I didn't see anything moving over in there. And it was somewhere in that cane thicket, and something was over there. And I was thinking immediately, this is a big buck, a big male deer is fixing to come out of here. And this is perfect moment for me because that's what I'm here for, a trophy deer. And about that time, the female turned to the right and took off running as fast as she could with the two younger ones following behind her. And like somebody had shot at her, she just took as fast as she could go. And I watched her run off to the right into the hardwoods until she disappeared. And I'm thinking, okay, here comes this big buck deer. And I'm sitting there waiting and waiting. And then all of a sudden, I started seeing the cane moving in the top. It was
Right.
moving from the back to the front. And it was swaying, and it was so thick I couldn't imagine. I was thinking this is one massive deer to come through this cane thicket like this, and come out. And I was very excited, and I remember reaching down and pulling the hammer back on my 50 caliber muzzle loader and thinking it's about to step out, and my best shot's going to be when it steps out because it's going to be standing still looking. And about that time, this creature steps out, and I'd never seen anything like that, and I was just absolutely in shock. I just kept looking, am I really seeing this thing? And it takes one step and it jumps or leaps, whatever we want to call it, completely across the creek in one step and lands on the top of the other side of the creek there, on top of that game trail. And it goes to the right, and I'm up on a real steep hillside, like a 45-degree angle. And
Yeah.
the tree I'm in, I'm up about 28 feet. I'm almost overlooking the creek by the angle. And this thing walks down the game trail and stops and looks right up at me and knew exactly where I was at. And by that time, I was just completely in shock. I had no idea what I was looking at. I'd never seen anything like that. And it showed me its teeth. It gritted them, and then it growled, looking at me. It was really mad at me, and it was the meanest, maddest looking creature I'd ever seen. And it was really mad. And then it stops a second. It walks over to that drag rag I had hanging in that tree limb, pulls it down, smells of it. Then it rips the whole tree limb out of the tree, throws it on the ground, walks back over a few more feet, straight in front, looking at me again, still showing its teeth, growling, making faces. And I'm just trying to breathe. I'm thinking, well, this thing's coming across the creek. It's going to pull me out of this tree and just kill
Oh
me.
my God.
And I've never been that scared in my life. And like I said, I don't scare easy. I've seen about everything you can think of in the woods as far as natural animals, bears and everything else, cats. But this thing was like something out of a horror movie. I'd never seen anything or knew anything like that existed. But about that time, as I'm in just completely trying to get my breath, I was trying to make my mind up. Should I fire on this thing? Should I jump out of the tree and run? What should I do? And I was really fearful that if I fired, and I only had one shot because it takes a good. I'm pretty quick to reload with a black powder horn and a Hornady bullet and a patch and a firing
Yeah.
count, but it's still a good 3 to 4 minutes by the time I get reloaded. And if this thing is not dead, it's going to continue to come. And I decided not to fire on it. So I really didn't know what to do. I was hoping it would just leave. And about that time, it let out a unbelievable scream, like between a scream and a yell. And it was so loud in that bottom of that hollow that it just echoed all down the hollow. And
Oh God,
this
very
thing
difficult.
is looking at me like it is just so mad that I'm there. And I'm thinking this is it, that this thing's coming across. And the best thing I can do is if it comes across that creek, I'm firing one shell right between the eyes. And um, then all of a sudden it just turns and it walks away. It stops and turns and looks back at me one time, and it continues to walk off into the hardwoods. And I watched it walk and walk, and then it was out of sight. And instead of climbing down the tree stand, which would take a good 15 minutes, I just lowered the bar in front of me and I jumped out of the top of the tree.
Oh God.
And I landed, of course, on that 45-degree angle roughly on the leaves, and I slid all the way down into the creek. I had my rifle above my gun above my head, and I jumped up out of the creek, took off running as fast as I could up that hillside that I'd come down, and looking back the whole time thinking, is this thing coming back after me? And I got over the first hill, and I was on the way up to the time I got to the top of the first hill, I was so out of breath that I had no choice but to stop and just catch my breath. And
Oh God, yeah.
it was, a good 150 yards or more from bottom to top, and it was practically straight up. And when I got coming down that second hill, I was started up the next hill. I looked back up on the hill, and there it was standing there watching me. It was standing on the top to the right behind a tree just watching me. And all that did was kick in my adrenaline more, and I just ran as fast as I could. And by the time I was coming down the last hill, I had to climb over that barbed wire fence that was about 7 foot tall. And
Oh God.
I decided that this thing is after me, and it wasn't after me, but I thought it was. And I jumped the barbed wire fence running down this hillside, and I caught my pants and ripped them all the way past my knee and tore a big gash in the side of my leg, but I didn't even know I'd done that. By the time I hit the ground, I was still running, and I had run across about a 200-yard wide sage field that my grandfather's cattle were in, and get to the gate, which I did, and opened the gate and went into his backyard and reached back and locked the gate and looked, and I didn't see this creature anywhere. And then I ran into the back of his house there and behind, and went into the kitchen area and pulled the screen door back and locked it, and looked out the glass door and didn't see it, and locked that door and looked again. And I was so out of breath, I ran into the right into the living area. My grandfather's sitting to the left in his rocking chair, and I just sat down over in the corner between this huge potbelly fire stove and him. And I just sat down in the corner over on the floor. I was just so out of breath, I couldn't breathe hardly. And he was asking me questions, and he says, "Boy, you look like you've seen a ghost." And I said, I can't talk. I got to catch my breath." And then I get up and go look out the window, and I went to the back door and looked out and made sure this thing wasn't coming. And I didn't see it, and I came back in and I sat down on the couch next to him, and I was just trying to get my breath, and he said, "Boy, what's wrong with you?" And my granddad always called me boy and never called me by my name. I said, "I seen a monster in the woods." And he said, "A monster?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "There ain't no monsters." And I said, "Yeah, this was a monster." And I told him. He said, "What did it look like?" And I told him. He goes, "Oh, you seen the woodburger." I said, "What is a woodburger?" I mean, I've been living here with you on this farm since I was a baby, and I've never heard of a woodburger. And he said, "Well, I didn't want to tell you and your cousins and your friends because I didn't want you to be scared to go in the woods or camp out in the woods or spend the night in the hayloft in the barn or whatever." And he said, "They live around here." He said, "I've seen 4 in my lifetime." He said, "I'll be working in a field and I'll look up and want to be looking over the fence at me while I'm working." He said, "Should have known that nobody'd been back in that area you're in quite a few years, and they're real territorial, and you probably messed up his hunt. That was probably his deer." And he got mad, and I didn't think about that when I told you to go there. But these creatures have been around here forever. I hear them all the time. I've seen them, and some of those noises you asked me about over the years were them. And you know, it was, he said, in the wintertime they get hungry, they come here and they take 2 or 3 chickens out of my hen house, and they'll leave a little pile of rocks and sticks like they're paying for it. And they're intelligent. They don't bother people as long as you don't bother them and stay out of their area. So I was still in shock because I was, you know, first of all, my granddad and I were super close. I mean, I couldn't have been any closer to anybody, and he never told me about these things. So,
How strange is that, but he never told you about it. Looking back at the creature, how big do you think it was then?
well, I judge it by the tree limb when I hung the drag rag. That's the only way I can really judge it, because that was around 8 foot tall, or maybe, you know, a couple of inches, give or take, either way. And because when I reach my arm out full length, it's 8 foot, and I've measured that before, and a little more than 8 foot, maybe 8 foot 1 or 2. But and the creature's head was about a little bit above that limb, so it was around 8 foot or a little more. Um, it was like I said, the meanest, ugliest looking thing I've ever seen, and I've seen those creatures since then, but I've never seen one of those, what they call the wood booger, which are mainly in the southern part of the United States, which would be Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, that area.
Right.
But it's just a really mean looking creature, and this one was really mad at me because I shouldn't have been in its area. But my
I can
granddad,
imagine so as well. When we're talking about Bigfoot and all that, what's the difference between the forest people and Bigfoot?
well, my personal opinion, and that's what it is, my opinion. You know, my second encounter was by pure accident. I didn't go in the woods for, oh my gosh, it was 7 years or longer. I quit deer hunting after that. You know,
Oh my God. I
I
bet
went up,
you did.
I went up there to my grandfather's farm with my buddies every year, and they hunted. I stayed at the house with my granddad and hung out with him. But you know, I didn't hunt anymore. I didn't want to go in the woods. What hunting I did do would be out of my truck in one of the fields we owned on our farm. I'd sit in the truck, wait for a deer to come out. But you know, I wasn't a lot of that going on because they don't happen a lot. But I pretty much quit hunting. I didn't want to go in the woods. I had nightmares for quite a while, and it was definitely a life changing experience. I had a very difficult time believing what I'd seen, and even second guessed myself, and because I couldn't imagine these things were living there, but they do. And after I went to the library and looked them up, and my granddad was right. The picture I found in a book had 10 different type of Bigfoot creatures, and the second one was called a wood booger, and it looked just like what I'd seen, except the picture had red eyes. The one I seen had dark eyes. It did not have red eyes. So I do believe there's a difference between these creatures. I don't know how many different types there are. I only know what I've experienced, and I believe I've seen 4 to 5 different types over the last 30 plus years. And the forest people are the ones who make the large X's, like 2 trees form an
Yeah.
X, or put them on the ground on the trail, the little small X's. When you find the area they're in, that's their marker, and they're not aggressive. They're very friendly. They do have a way, I believe, well, I know they do, of reading you, and they feel what's in your heart. And if you're not trustworthy, you're probably not going to see one. And you know, they're not aggressive. You know, as long as you're not trying to harm them or their family. But the ones I encountered were super nice, and they were my friends for nearly 5 years. And if it hadn't been for them, I would have probably never got over my first encounter, because these creatures were nothing like that one. And I realized that there's good and bad in everything. I mean, there's bad people, good people, and these creatures never were aggressive with me. It took me a long time to get their complete trust, but they had their trust in me, and I had my trust in them. And they're just different. They're not like what I'd witnessed the first time. So I don't know how to explain the difference, but the ones that I call the forest people look more like the Patterson Gimlin type creature, the Patty, more like that type creature.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about what's the connection between Bigfoot sightings and the UFO and the phenomena?
I've been asked that many a times. I've never seen an UFO that I'm aware of. I have seen something flying through the sky at night. I didn't know what it was, but I've never seen an alien. I don't really know. Lots of people, friends of mine, very close friends of mine, have witnessed Bigfoot after seeing some type of spacecraft or something in the air, and it may be related. I truthfully think that all this stuff is related in some way. I don't know what it would be, but I just think it all is, and that goes as far as Bigfoot, Dogman, the paranormal. I think it's all has some kind of connection some way.
Tell us about the beast of the land between the lakes, and where did the legend originate?
Well, as far as I can tell, I've been going to the land between the lakes all my life, and most of my life. When I was a little boy, I went there when I was probably 9 or 10 the first time. But Martin Groves and I spent a number of years there together. And then, he had his first encounter there in 1993, which changed his life forever. A couple of dogman creatures and 2 Bigfoot, tried to kill him. So the land between the lakes is probably the strangest place I've ever been in. And, no matter how many times you go there, when you drive through the entrance, you get a funny feeling. And it's a whole different place at night when the lights go out. So it's not for everybody. And some people go in there, don't see anything. They don't have any type of experiences. Other people go in there and have lots of experiences. So
Do you think we are chosen to see things like this?
I think some of us have a better ability to see things over some other people. I do think that, yes. And I think some people are, with the people that have a little higher energy, seem to be those type people. And a Bigfoot, I know, has a higher vibration. Those creatures are just higher strung. And a lot of people have higher energy than other people, and I do know I'm one of those people, and I do see those creatures for some reason. The Bigfoot I'm talking about, they seem to know when I'm in the woods, or it seems like they find me to me. So I don't know why that is, but that's the truth. I mean, when I go in with Martin, he'll say, "Well, do you feel any of them?" And I usually get a feeling when they're there or close by, and I'll say, "Yeah, I feel one kind of to the left, maybe up on that hill." And about that time, a rock will come flying by, so a small rock or a stick. They're trying to get our attention and let us know that, hey, we're up here. You don't need to be in our area unless we invite you. So it just depends on, all these creatures are different. Like I said, they're like, there's good and bad in everything. But going back to the LBL, it was called the land between the rivers in the day, and there were certain town names in there. And they flooded this area in the 1960s. The Tennessee Valley Authority built dams there for electricity. Built a huge lake called Kentucky Lake, which feeds from the Cumberland River in Tennessee, which turns into the Kentucky Lake, Tennessee River on the right side, and when it gets past Cheatham, Tennessee, the Cumberland River becomes Lake Markley. It's still the same body of water, just called something different. But that area was said by the Indians and the French settlers that had been there. It was said to have the dog man in the late 1700s, a dog-like creature who attacked animals and I believe even people on occasion. But that creature has seemed to have been there for a long time, being late 1700s. So I don't know if it's. I think there are different type of dog men also. I know there's different type of Bigfoot, but I don't know the fact about these things being some of them being government altered or government made. I don't know that be the case. I mean, I'm sure that's a definite possibility because throughout World War II there were several things going on where they were trying to mutate or build some type of special soldier. So I know
Yeah,
those creatures
I
are
know.
there.
I know because one of the questions I'm going to ask you: how do stories of forest people differ across the regions, e.g., Sasquatch and um, another humanoid creatures, and especially in the Himalayas as well, the Yeti?
I think the Yeti's probably pretty similar to Bigfoot. It's just in a different part of the country. The Yeti's in Russia or some of the Himalayas or those areas. I think it's probably pretty similar to the same type creature. It's just in a different area and it's called a different name. I don't think there's now you get to some of these areas where they have one. It's called, I believe it's called the orang pendak, and that's in some of the eastern countries, but it's
Oh
a
yeah.
lot smaller version of a Bigfoot than we know. So the Yeti seems to be a little bigger than some of the standard Bigfoot stories I hear in the U.S. But there are some large Bigfoot in the U.S. too, though. I've heard lots of stories of as much as 16, 17-foot tall creatures. I've never seen one of those, but I've seen quite a few of them. I don't think I've ever seen one much taller than 8 foot or maybe 8 foot and a half or 8'2" or whatever. But I've never seen anything with that size myself. And but I do know people that claim they have, and I do believe them. I just haven't seen them myself.
How do scientists approach cryptozoology and claims of the unknown species?
Well, I don't really think the scientists will ever admit that Bigfoot exists. I don't think that ever happens. And there's a couple of reasons, in my personal opinion. And again, I said it's my personal opinion. And the first thing is, when I was growing up in school, I'm a Christian and I believe in biblical terms and what the Bible says. I kind of follow that. But a lot of your scientists, the biggest majority of them, they have what's called the evolution wheel, which all the going back to the caveman to whatever, they're on the wheel. These people who turned into a different type creature as time went on, or coexisted into the Neanderthal or whatever you call those creatures, or men at one time. Those the scientists, most of them think that's where we all evolved from. Some of them think we evolved from an ape, but I don't believe that personally, but I do think that the scientists don't really know where this creature is from or why it exists, and the ones that do know exist, and the government is very aware of these creatures. There's no doubt. You can go into national areas like, for example, Colorado Springs, Pikes Peak area, and there's signs about Bigfoot there. Be careful, watch out for these creatures. They've been seen here. I mean, the government knows these creatures are there, and the scientists will never admit they're there because they don't know where to fit them in the evolution wheel, because I don't personally think they fit in it anywhere. So I believe that these creatures are a human hybrid, 100% human hybrid, more than likely a female human that bred with this whatever creature it was from probably another galaxy or another planet, to because when the DNA study come out with Dr. Melba Kitchum on the Genome Project, which I 100% believe, I see no reason why anybody wouldn't believe that. And there was over 100 samples of DNA there, and including saliva, including blood, including hair of several Bigfoot that different people had taken DNA from. And the blood came from what was called a nail board, where the Bigfoot stepped on a nail board and blood came off the end of the nail. Saliva came from food they left in the woods. There were several people involved with that. The late, great Scott Carpenter helped Dr. Melba Kitchum, and quite a few people did. But, when the DNA come back from several DNA labs at that time, it came back 58% human female, 42% unknown creature. So, I don't see why nobody doesn't believe that.
I know. I think it's Washington State. You're not allowed to shoot a Bigfoot.
Washington, it is against the law to shoot Bigfoot. You're exactly right. That's actually a law. And there's a lot of strange things that the government will print, but they won't admit existence. So, I have no doubt the biggest reason that the government, I'm talking about the U.S. government, does not admit that these creatures exist because, for example, Land Between the Lakes is not run by the National Park Association. It's run by the National Forestry Association. So at one time it was a national park. Now it's National Forestry. But you go, the tourism every year in the United States national parks is a 2.8 billion. That's with a billion, about $2.8 billion industry. And that's a lot of money. And that's a lot of funding that it helps the U.S. government keep these parks up and run them and pay people to work there. And I'm sure some of it going into the general fund for the U.S. government also. But, with that kind of number, you start telling people, well, there might be a 8-foot or taller hairy man running around out in the woods, and he might kill you, he might not, but we want to let you know they're out there. That's going to hurt revenue, regardless how you look at it. Some people are not going. They're not going to take grandma and grandpa's not taking the kids out in the woods and camp out in a tent all night if they think something like that exists. So
true. Do some people believe Bigfoot has supernatural or interdimensional abilities?
Well, I 100% believe that. I don't know if all of them do, but some of them have the ability. Maybe all of them. Ryan Moorhead, one of my best friends, he wrote the best book that's ever been written on that. It's called Quantum. Quantum is the name of the book by my close friend Ron Moorhead. Actually, I've got the copy right here behind me, Quantum Bigfoot. And it's the best book I've ever read about that particular thing. These creatures have a higher energy, and they have the ability, I believe, to go interdimensional or cloaking, whatever you want to call it. Have I ever seen one do that? No, I have not. Do I think they do? Yes, I do think they have the ability. I have seen orbs in the woods, huge orbs, and you can actually almost see what looks like maybe a Bigfoot-like face inside of some of those. And I don't know how these creatures have abilities they have. They do have some of them, maybe all of them. I don't know how that works either, but they have an ability to do things that's pretty powerful because the creatures I was around on the Cumberland River in Tennessee for less than 5 years, and I really became close friends with them. They have a way to read you. They read your intentions, and it's absolutely amazing. I mean, sometimes before I would even bring their food or their gifts to them a lot, and they would make me stuff and make me gifts, and even bring me fish. So these creatures have an ability that we don't understand. And, you take your average family, whether it be in the UK or United States, that doesn't look into Bigfoot or look into Dogman or any of these creatures. They don't pay no attention to any of that type of stuff. they don't realize what's out in the woods or out in the forest, and they don't understand how this interdimensional type thing works. And I only understand what little I've read, and I think Ron Moorhead wrote the best book ever for that. I've read that book 5 times. Every time I read it, I learn a little bit more.
Oh, brilliant. Are there claims of a government cover-up or secret experiments?
I don't have any evidence that that's happened, but it's like I was saying earlier. You go back to World War II, and there were a lot of government experiments going on with different animals and different things at that time. And I don't doubt that it's not going on now. Why would it not be? And we won't know. Your average person or citizen won't know about that. But I'm sure it's very well kept secret, top secret, and you're not going to know about it. I do believe the dog man that Martin Groves and I seen in October of 2023. I've never seen anything like that in my life, and it went from a bluish colored mist to a silver gray type dog man looking creature with a head the half size of our truck windshield and mane like a lion and deep eyes like small flashlights. And that creature was nothing like anything flesh and blood I've ever seen. And when it come out of the ravine, I was 5 to 7 foot from this creature, and when it come out of the ravine, it was laying, and it was laying down like it was going to pounce on me, like a cat would look when it was going to pounce on a mouse or playing or with some type of ball of thread or something. But when it came out of that ravine, it went around our truck, and we're in the deep middle of nowhere, the LBL, and went around Martin's truck, and it didn't like walk; it like glided around the truck. And I had a very bright flashlight, Martin and I both did, and when it went to the left in the field, it was just like gliding by, and it looked like a flesh and blood creature, but it was also transparent at the same time. So I don't know. Maybe that was one of those type creatures, or maybe that one was coming out of a portal. I don't know.
But when you're talking about that, why do you think we see more Bigfoot and dogmen? And that's why we're talking more about them.
Well, I definitely think we're seeing more Bigfoot because their numbers have increased. First of all, since when I first had my first experience, I never heard of anybody in my area. If Bigfoot existed, it wasn't in Tennessee. It was in British Columbia or Washington State or California or Oregon, one of those areas. It wasn't. I never would have dreamed that one of these creatures was in the Tennessee area, but now I hear about them all the time. I mean, I hear people saying they've seen them, they hear them, and it's a regular thing. It's more accepted now than it was, when it happened to me in 1992. You couldn't tell anybody. If you did, they thought you were crazy. And now you've got groups, you've got quality shows like yours here, where we can talk about it on the air, and other people can comment and listen and learn. And we're all in this together, and I'm no expert at anything. I can only tell you what I've encountered and experienced. And these creatures are very they have such a strong way of first of all, intelligence. They are so intelligent. They're a lot smarter than a lot of people. They just have a way of knowing a person for what they are. And
I think the Native American Indians used to barter with them.
what I've heard, yes, from the Native American tribes, they did barter with them and they coexisted with them. But some of the Native American tribes dealt with a lot of problems with them because it's lots of areas. These creatures would come in the middle of the night into villages and steal women and children. And I do think that that's probably the female part of this DNA I was talking about a minute ago. So, I mean, I'm sure there may be, other nationalities that have bred with these creatures at one time or another. I don't know, but not just saying it's Native American. I have Native American in my blood, and my all the Native Americans here in the U.S. The tribes from years back, they all have stories about these creatures.
Yeah. Another thing I was going to ask you about: how far back do the stories go about Bigfoot?
I'm not really. I found stories from talking to people. Now, these, there's no way to document something you hear about in the 1800s. You just have to go by what's written or what somebody put on paper. And, what I understand that, that Davy Crockett, the American frontiersman from Tennessee, where I'm from, that he encountered a Bigfoot. He and his son, I understand, shot one that they thought was going to attack them. And that was in the, early, mid 1800s when that happened. I'm sure they probably go back further than that, but there wasn't a lot of documented evidence about these creatures because there wasn't any radio or TV or any way for people to stay on top of it and get it out to the public. So I don't think you'll find as much documentation from any further back because it just doesn't exist.
Another thing I was going to ask you about as well: did Bigfoot terrorize your house?
Yeah, and in the year 2020, I had been in the area of Cheatham County in 2000. I think we were there, started researching that area in 2018. Me and a couple of friends of mine that we were going there regularly because a friend had called. Billy Howell, a friend of mine that lives in the same county, and said that his girlfriend was scared to death because there was some kind of creature looking through her window at night. And Billy in turn called me because he knew I knew about Bigfoot and
Yeah.
that thing. And another friend of mine, Derry Yarbrough, I mentioned to him, and we went down and researched that area for quite a while, and we kind of got on a pattern. We were figuring out what was going on. The gentleman who lived there, David, and he's deceased now. Unfortunately, him and his brother were both friends of mine in high school.
No.
He was an over the road truck driver. He would leave on Monday and drive to New York City and unload, and he'd be back by Friday every week. And his girlfriend was by herself there for 4 or 5 nights during the week. And they're kind of out of a remote area of Cheatham County, Tennessee. And these things would look in her window and scare her to death, and she didn't know what they were. And they started taking vegetables off of her deck and eating scraps that she would put out for the dogs. And he relayed the message to Billy to get a hold of me, and we went down there and started researching that area. We had a lot of weird things happen down there. It would take quite a while to go into all the details that did happen down there, but we had a gifting spot down there, and Billy had seen the large one, and I did not see the large male. I did see one of the males going into some brush, and I seen a juvenile that walked right up to the truck, looked in the window where Billy. We were sitting in the driveway going back into this area. Just taking a break before we went in, and I did see that one, and we thought we were in pretty good shape. We had gotten them away from the house, and they weren't bothering her like they were. We were gifting them in the back area, probably 100 yards from the house, and they were staying back there instead of going up to the house and bothering her. And for some reason, we started having a lot of orbs back there, these balls of light.
How big are when you're looking at these orbs? How big are they?
Well, when it first started, this was in 2000. Well, when it first started was 2000. Probably it was right around March or April let's see, yeah, probably more like April of 2020 when we seen the big orbs. Now, the big orbs were about the size of a beach ball. They were pretty good size. There was two of them, and they came down from the top. Well, let me go into the entire story here.
Yeah.
What actually happened before that? I'm in the woods. The gifting spot's probably 50 yards from me. It's a tree stump, and we put their food and stuff we brought them there on that tree stump. And they would come in the night and get it, and we could see the silhouette of them picking it up and going off. If we had a flashlight, and we didn't cut that on unless we had to. It was a huge, bright light. It wasn't a flashlight. It was like a beam that would light up the entire woods that Billy had. And if something come down, we would turn that on. And we hadn't had to use it before, but this particular night, I was sitting behind a tree on top of going up the side of a hillside, pretty steep hillside. Billy was down below me, probably, I don't know how far he was, probably 50 yards from me behind a tree. And we were waiting. We had just put stuff out there for them to come in and get. And I seen this what looked like a light bulb. It looked just like a light bulb and a lamp. There was a little round ball of light. It was about the size of a light bulb. Way up into the woods, I could see this little ball of light coming down on the ground. It was like a light bulb walking on the ground. And I watched it come from a long distance off, well over 100 yards. It got bigger and brighter, and it went through a ravine, and I didn't see it. Then it came up out of the ravine, and it was coming right toward me, walking on the ground. It was just a small light bulb looking light. And I've never seen anything like that. I said, what is that? I looked at Billy and yelled at him. I said, man, what is this coming toward me? And this thing came all the way. I'm sitting behind a huge tree with two big forks. And this thing came all the way to the tree. I mean, I'm within a foot and a half, 2 foot from it. I didn't know what it was. It kind of startled me. And I pulled out my 45 and pointed it at it. I didn't know what it was. And about that time, Billy hit the big light that lit up the woods. And when he did, this thing turned into an opossum. A possum or opossum, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, my God.
It was an opossum. It opened its mouth. It looked at me and it hissed. And then it turned around in a natural form of a possum. And we watched it in the dark, the silhouette of it going through the woods the same way it came until it got out of sight. And then about maybe 20 minutes after it was gone, we seen these huge, two big orbs come down from the trees somewhere in the sky. We were in the trees, so it was hard to tell where they came from, but they came down through the trees, and both of them were about the same size, about the size of a beach ball. There were two right together, and they were pulsating kind of a pink, orange, and red color inside of them.
Yeah.
And they were hovering about maybe 2 foot off the ground, just sitting there, just hovering. And it kind of weirded me out. I'd never seen anything like that. And I told Billy, I said, man, what is going on here? That's really strange. We got a light bulb. Now we got these things. And they just sat there for a while. And finally they started moving. And they were going down toward the gifting spot. So Billy and I got up and ran back to his truck, and because they were going back down into the woods, and there was a gravel road on the side of that field that overlooked the side of that hillside. And we got in his truck and went down it, and we could see those orbs going through the woods, back through the woods. And we watched them till they disappeared. And it was very strange. I never understood what that was all about. And, we had just gotten zapped the week before, infrasounded in that area. And that was very strange. And all my electronics went out that night. My watch stopped, I think at 12:48 at night. Everything went out. Our car alarms went off and wouldn't stop. And they finally went off by themselves. And David's truck, the gentleman who lived there, he had pulled in behind us, and his was going off. And the lady called and said, "These creatures are here. Y'all need to get back to the house." And we ran back, but we were really sick. I got, I think that was my second time of being infrasounded or zapped, whatever you want to call it, and
Yeah.
by Bigfoot. And I've been zapped twice by Bigfoot, once by Dogman. But anyway, the next week, I was feeling really weird about even going back down to this place because I didn't understand what this was all about. And so we went back the next Saturday and Saturday night, and we got there early, and it was raining, not real hard, but we had an old plastic type deer blind that's laid on the ground that you could hunt out of, and we got in it to keep dry. And then all of a sudden, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, all these white orbs about the size of a softball. I think there were 6 or 7 of them. They were just humming between the trees like really fast, going all around us and back through the trees. And we watched those things for quite a while, and I got kind of freaked out about it. I said, "Man, I don't like this. This is very strange." So I said, "I'm leaving." So I got up, and Billy did too. We both left and got in our vehicles and went on back to went home. And he called me, and I called him the next couple of days. I said, "Man, I'm taking a break from down there. There's something strange going on down there, and I don't care to go down there."
How did when you go to a place like that and you come away, how did you feel in yourself?
I just felt really strange. I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand what those balls were. They were flying really fast around he and I, and right around the trees and everything. And I didn't understand what they were, but they did make me feel very weird, and I didn't like the feeling, so that's why I left. And I told Billy, "I'm taking a break. I'm not going down there for 3 or 4 weeks. I'm just going to stay away from there for a while." And that's when either 2 or 3 Bigfoot started terrorizing my home. And I don't know why they did, or if it had anything to do with that. It may not have, but I don't know of any problem I'd had before, and it was after the orbs. So it all started. I was at home by myself, and I lived by myself there. My children lived with their mother. My daughter did, not far from there, and these like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, something was banging on the side of my house, and I'm talking about hitting it really hard, like with a lot of force. And
Yeah.
I got up and went and looked out the window, didn't see anything, and I laid back down, and it started doing it again. And I went out the front door with my rifle and went around the side of the house, and I didn't see anything, and went back in, and a little bit later, it started on the other side of the house, and I was getting pretty weirded out by it, and I didn't really understand what was going on. And I had called a close friend of mine, David, who was a sheriff where I was at that time where I was the mayor at, and asked him, "Hey, if you get a chance tonight, you don't have any calls, when you drive down my driveway's 3,300 feet off the road, so it's way back off the road." And
Sounds like it.
I had a farm back there, and it was paved back there, and you could see the road very well from my drive, but these things kept beating on my house in the middle of the night. I didn't know it was a Bigfoot at first. I couldn't figure out what it was. I thought maybe it was something, all of a sudden, some kind of paranormal or something going on. But
Yeah.
it got to banging so hard that the actual pictures rattled on the wall.
Oh,
And,
God.
and then I went outside that next night, and when it started, and I couldn't even sleep at night. I'd stay up with a gun because I didn't know I didn't know if something was. I didn't know what it was. And then I found.
Did your friend call round in his car then?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Did he call round at your house, your friend, the sheriff?
Yeah, he came out so quite a few times and drove down my driveway and shined his spotlight on my house and behind it, and didn't see anything. And matter of fact, Martin Groves came out and did the same thing. And um, what happened? It just got worse and worse, and then I started finding tracks where they were banging on the side of my house. I had poured flour out there on the ground or right around the house because it was very dry right there. And I thought if something steps in it, it'll leave a track. And
Yeah.
it did. It did leave a track, and I could tell what it was. It was a large footprint. And I knew it wasn't a man because it was too big. I guess there's people that have a large foot, but I didn't think this is what that was. But I started thinking then, for some reason, these Bigfoot are mad at me, and I haven't done anything to them. And it kept on, and then it started terrorizing my horses. They were scared to death. I would hear them at 2 o'clock in the morning running down the fence line, both sides of my driveway coming in. On the left side was a barn that was fenced in, and I had two horses on that side. On the right side, I had two horses where I had a stable at, and they were both male horses, and they would go crazy. I could hear them just running down the fence line. At the very end of the fence line, on both sides of my drive, I had a huge street light on both sides, and I had a row of hay under there where they could see it at night, and it was just the corners of my drive there. It was lit up where you could see pretty good. They'd run right to that light. They wouldn't leave. They wouldn't get
Oh,
away from. They wouldn't get away from that light. And I would hear all kinds of noises down there, and I'd walk down the driveway with my rifle, and I'd go in the stable, and I didn't see anything. But the horses were just scared to death. They wouldn't leave the light, and then I had a lot of cats that were in the barn. They weren't really my cats. They were farm cats, so they'd come there. And I started finding, and at nighttime, they would come up on my porch. I would pour cat food out for them at night, and they'd come up there and eat. And they were all wild, and them are very friendly. But I'd feed them, and I started finding them everywhere torn apart.
oh,
And it got pretty rough. There was a lot of damage going on at my house. They were tearing off some siding, and they were bent the fence in a couple spots. And anyway, this went on for. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep. I was up all night long, and I would normally go get my kids and bring them over and let them play at the house during the daytime and get them home before dark. And
yeah.
I didn't want them there with that going on. So I was up all night long every night, and then it got to the point where it got worse and worse. And one night was I heard them banging on the house, and I hid out on my screened-in porch, and they came around the other side, and I went back inside the house in the hallway, and I could see two of them walk by my porch, walk by the windows on my front porch there. I had a window on both sides of the big door. I had a big, huge, thick wooden door. And seen them walk by that, and I thought, well, here they come. They're going. I thought these things were trying to kill me. I didn't understand what I'd ever done to them, and I'd cut the light on, and they would run off. But this one night, I was sitting in the hall. I just knew they were going to try to come in, and I heard something bang on the side of the door, and I thought, well, here they come. I was ready to just start firing. And I went and jumped and turned the porch light on and opened the door, and there was a goat laying in front of the door, a dead goat right in front of the door. I practically tripped over it. And they had thrown it up on the front door. I thought it was them. They had threw this, and we didn't have any goats, and I don't know anybody around me that did, but there was a goat a dead goat laying at my front door, and I went out in the front yard, and I just started yelling at them. I said, I've had enough of this. Y'all come on. One of us, y'all come and get me, or I'll get y'all. I'm sitting right here. I just sat down in the middle of the front yard and waited on them and sat out there the rest of the night and never seen them or heard them again that night. But it was getting to the point where I was getting a little scared and I was tired and wore out too. And I called my good friend Scott Carpenter, the late great Scott Carpenter, and Michael Patterson had told me, call Scott. He knows all about that kind of stuff. And I did. I called Scott and he said, well, you got to rebuke them. He said, that will get rid of them. I said, well, how do I do that? And he told me how to do it. You go to all four corners of your property and all four corners inside your house. And if you believe in your heart that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, he said that had to be the case. If you didn't believe that, it wouldn't work. And I do believe that. So I did it. And the next night I was sitting in the hall waiting for him to come back again. I didn't know where it was going to work or not. And they never came back. And I don't know why they were mad at me or scaring my animals and beating on my house. I have no idea. But
are you still in the same house?
No, I don't live there now. I sold my house a few years ago. I lived there for over 20 years, but I sold my house a few years ago. But I have asked the gentleman who lives there now is a doctor from California, and he had asked me, have you ever heard anything around here at night? And I said, like what? And this has been a couple of years right after he had bought it, and I said, yeah, I've heard some things. I didn't want to scare him, because I'd never had any problem with Bigfoot there. So, and I lived there a long time, and I know they were in that area. But no reason for them to ever do what these creatures had done. I'd not done anything to them, and that was the most mysterious part. Like, why are they doing this? So, that was what happened. That went on for about probably 2.5 months before it ended. So, thank goodness for the late great Scott Carpenter. He helped me out a whole lot with that.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we've come to the end of the show. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. Paul sends his regards as well.
I think the world of Paul Sinclair. He's one of the best.
Yeah, so thank you again.
Thank everybody for watching.
Yeah. Thank you. And it's been fascinating subject.
Thank you again for having me. And good day to you.
And good day.